Hello and welcome to Pixel Bits, a tutorial series about creating pixel art. In this episode we will be going over a few shading fundamentals that might help you with shading your pixel art. Let's start with this circle. When a beginner tries and shade this into looking like a sphere, it might result in something that looks like this. This is what is referred to as pillow shading. Sure, there's shading, but there's no sense of shape, no direction of the light source. It's just shadow around the edges. If we instead consider the 3D shape of the object and determine the light source direction, we could end up with something that looks like this. If you notice how there's a little red highlight at the bottom left of the sphere, that is indirect light being reflected from the surface that it's laying on. Take a look at a reference and you will see that there's usually indirect lights hitting objects from other angles. The only time there would not be indirect bouncing lights would be in space, but that's a very specific instance. So it's a very good practice to decide an origin of light and sticking to it. Make sure that every surface in your pixel art has consistent light sources in order to keep track of what surfaces that should be lit and which surfaces that should be in shadow. It's a good practice to visualize what your art would look like in 3 dimensions, and if it's hard to imagine all the complex shapes that can occur in an image, then try and simplify the shapes in your head down to more basic geometric shapes, and then from there decide what parts that should be lit and what parts that should be in shadow. And here's some art theory. When shading things, the colors in shadows are usually referred to as shades, and the ones in direct light are usually referred to as tints, but I like to call them highlights because I'm a cool kid. A good rule when observing an image's grayscale value is to make sure that the lightest dark always is darker than the darkest light. So what did that sentence mean? It's a rule of thumb that says that you should always keep the lightest shadows darker than your least bright lit surfaces, or in other words, all your shadows should always be darker than your tints or highlights. When shading, it's good to consider how you want to tackle outlines. Should you even use outlines, or should you keep it solid or shade the outline? Remember to keep it consistent. And when shading, remember to keep the amount of shades constant over your assets and the way you shade them. Dithered, non-dithered, or just all like crazy, just try and keep your shading style consistent in a project. So let's say you've made these rocks and you're happy with them, and then you start making more assets, but when you put them together in a scene, it just looks off. Let's take a look at the values of the colors in the scene and see what's wrong. And the value is the amount of black in any given color. So if we look here, we can see that the value ranges starts and ends at different points, and if we compare them closer, we can see that some have strong jumps in shadows between shades and the color palette, while others don't, and this creates inconsistency in the scene. Different amounts of shading colors and varying in contrast or value range can create inconsistencies in your scene and result in them looking like they don't belong together, and in some cases it might not even look like they're from the same game. So let's fix the value inconsistency and bring them more together into a uniform and control state. And now it looks more consistent. So to summarize, keep in mind the light source direction and the shapes of your objects. Shadows are usually referred to as shades, and lit surfaces are usually referred to as tints. And however you shade your art, remember to keep it consistent. Shading is a really big and complex topic, and this was just a really basic video, but if you have any suggestions on specific topics that you would like for me to cover, just comment that down below and I will put that on my list of future topics to cover. But that's it for this video. If you like my art, you can check out my Twitter where I post stuff regularly, or my Twitch where I stream game dev and pixel art. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.